Your home for the best college football coverage in Utah is on the KSL Sports Zone. Ready? The Cougars hit the road for a huge matchup against SMU. Your home for the best coverage of Cougar football is right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, want to remind you about First and 12, Sunday afternoon from 10 to noon, brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms and your favorite local brands. Macy's, happy shopping. BYU, SMU coming up tomorrow. Ben, let's get out to the zone phone. Joining us now, he covers SMU and college sports for LoneStarLive.com. He's Jacob Richman with us here on Jake and Ben. Jacob, what's going on, buddy?
Not too much. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Really excited for this matchup. I think it's going to be a fun one, and looking forward to BYU visiting Dallas.
There's a lot of people in Utah wondering what SMU is as a football team, because obviously the first week against Nevada, week 0, was not a very impressive performance. Need to outscore Nevada by 16 in the fourth quarter to come back and win that game. But they seem to be a totally different animal at home, where they put up a ton of points and seem to beat basically everybody. Who are they?
Yeah, I think that's something that us here in Dallas, we're also still trying to figure out. And I think that this game is a really good measuring stick for them because, yeah, they've been really strong at home recently, but this is also a big opportunity for them to finally get a power conference win. They haven't won a game against a power conference team at home since 2010. It's been a while since they've been able to pull that off, and I think that this is their kind of real first chance to show that they can compete with bigger, stronger athletes, not just kind of what they've been doing in the AAC these past few years. So, I think we know what they're good at. It's about seeing how consistently they can do that.
I know everybody down there is really high on Coach Lashley and what he's building and the success he's had. What has he done right? What has he done differently than other coaches before?
I think with Lashley, you see a real commitment to making SMU a brand again, making SMU what Dallas is known for. And it's not gonna happen overnight. It's certainly not gonna be finished at the end of this year. But I think he understands that we're in a hot spot for high school and college sports, and that SMU obviously not being in a power conference certainly has hurt it, but they've not really been able to take the opportunity to come back since the death penalty and announce we're going to be committed. We're gonna put out a good football team. We're going to compete with top level opponents. So I think he's not really shied away from that at all. You're seeing that with his upcoming recruiting class. 2025 is set to be one of the best, in history, but definitely the best since in the modern recruiting era. And I think that all goes down to what the coaching staff's doing right now.
BYU gave up 121 yards on the ground to DJ Williams, the Southern Illinois quarterback, and that's a fear going into this game. But how much of a threat with their legs are Preston Stone and Kevin Jennings?
I think they're both solid mobile quarterbacks. I think Kevin Jennings is probably the one that you look at and you're like, if someone was going to break out and go on these big runs, be that, a constant threat in that game, it's going to be Kevin. He's a little bit faster. He's not afraid to improvise at all. With Preston, it's more of he's really good at moving and extending the pocket, being able to extend his plays to go out and wait for a receiver to get open, but he's not afraid to go take off downfield. So they certainly offer a threat there. But it's going to kind of depend on just how much SMU uses each one of them.
We had Jim McMahon on our station earlier this week. Are people still familiar with the history between these two teams? I mean, does the name Jim McMahon still, inspire a shudder?
I think a little bit. I think I'll be honest. I think that with the recent history is more what a lot of people in and around the team have been thinking about. I think that 2022 bowl game has been a surprisingly big talk about. I know the New Mexico Bowl is maybe not the grandest stage, but it was an important game at the start of this new era of SMU where they're really trying to reassert themselves and talk about a revenge game and the fact that they are 0-4 all time against BYU. I think they really. I've honestly started to see this game as being a little bit more important than some of the ones that many people going into the season would have thought of, like the Florida States and the Louisvilles.
What's the expectation for SMU's defense? We know they can score the ball, and they're going to come out and they're going to put up, at least 30 points. I think is a very fair expectation. Can their defense hold BYU below that?
I think the defense has been really interesting these first 2 weeks. Last year they were they were dominant. They were the reason that SMU won their conference championship game. They're the reason that they made it to 11 wins. They brought back so much talent and then just added in the transfer portal to really try and beef up the line of scrimmage. I think that week 1 game you watched and you were a little bit underwhelmed, but I also think that they were put in some tough situations by the offense, struggling at the open. And I'll say one of their, I think, biggest deficits is that they struggle with those mobile quarterbacks, the quarterbacks who extend the play if they're not able to break down the pocket fast enough and they're able to go make something happen. But this past week against Houston Christian, obviously FCS opponent, but they were able to get those turnovers. Turnovers were really big last year. I think they had at least one in their last 10 games and normally had multiple. So I think the big thing to watch for with SMU's defense, because they're more than capable of it, is making those big plays, being able to grab the interception, being able to strip sacks are a really big part of their game. SMU's got a great group of edge rushers that know how to, break a pocket down quickly. If they can get to, quarterback, get to Retzlaff quickly, I think that's when they're really going to start cooking.
What kind of environment can the Cougars and Cougar fans expect?
So it'll be unique because, we got a Friday game, and I'll be the first one to say this. Friday nights do belong to high school football in Texas. That's never going to change. I hope it never changes. That's what we're known for. But I think that the excitement behind the program means that, it's going to be a pretty strong turnout. The student section was pretty phenomenal last week. It's only, I think it's a 5,000 undergrad at school there, and they had, I believe, about 4,000 students at this past game for an FCS opponent. So, and they get sat right behind the BYU bench. So I think they can expect, that there'll be some excitement. Don't expect, the numbers you'd find from a massive state school, but that people are as energized as ever about SMU right now.
What type of a weapon is Brashard Smith? How much of a known factor is he transferring over from Miami last year?
Well, he was recruited out of high school by Rhett Lashley to Miami, so the coaching staff was super familiar with him. But obviously, he was being used as a wide receiver and return specialist primarily at Miami, and then he arrives at SMU, and they say, "Hey, we think that running back is the way to go." And as I was watching it, you could tell he can do a lot anytime he gets the ball. But I think even I was surprised at just how much he could do in the run game. He's incredibly explosive, bounces off of defenders really easily. It's a different level of running backs than I think SMU had last year, even though they returned some solid running backs who know how to be explosive, who know how to chunk out yardage. Brashard Smith's averaging, I think, almost 9 yards a carry. And we'll see if that keeps up. I think BYU will 100% be the toughest defense that they've faced so far and are going to be a lot more stingy with him. But if he finds a gap, he's going to be trouble.
Has membership in the ACC been the differences in, recruiting or however you want to take it? Have the differences been immediate and noticeable? Yeah,
I mean, it's night and day. The kind of players that they're able to get both in the transfer portal and in recruiting right now, their 25 recruiting class lined up. I think they're going to have 4 or 5 4-stars right now, and they've had, I think, 2 in the past decade or so. It's completely alter the game because players want to come and play the Florida States, the Miamis, the Clemsons for at least as long as they, are in the ACC. We'll see how that all pans out. But it's really changed the game for them. And when it comes to transfers, they've been able to kind of hone in on this concept of bringing back, Dallas natives, people who played high school in and around the area, who went off to other schools and are now like, hey, I want to come play at home, and I want to play for a big team. And I think they've got some big players like Deuce Harmon from A&M, and Ashton Cozart, someone you might not see too much of on Friday, but he's a really exciting receiver that went to Oregon for a year, didn't quite work out. He's at SMU, and he's looking really exciting.
You mentioned Retzlaff and his ability to keep plays alive and how that could be a problem for SMU. What else that BYU does or may threaten to do would cause concern for SMU?
I think it's going to be probably primarily just if Retzlaff is really on the money with his throws. I think that SMU plays solid in the secondary, but sometimes leaves just a little bit too much space. And if they, play the right quarterback who's really able to find those gaps, because I think that the secondary struggles to kind of lock down on any kind of man coverage. I think that it really opens up the opportunity for, kind of an elite level passing performance to really break them down on defense.
It's amazing to look at the ACC and how this schedule could really open up for SMU. And I know they're coming off of, an 11-win season last year, but you got BYU and TCU coming up. And then, FSU looks terrible. We don't know what Louisville's going to be. Stanford's not good. Duke's not very good. Pitt's not very good. Boston College beat Florida State, but that might not be anything. And then they finish with Virginia and Cal. It's just like, man, they get through these next couple of games, they could really, really benefit SMU. They could have a special season on their hands.
Yeah, you look at the schedule, and it certainly doesn't look as daunting as I think most people would think of a power conference schedule. But I think that they still have a lot of prove me games, left on before that. You can really, I think, start considering it to be that level. Because something that Rhett Lashley's talked about, like they don't see themselves as favorites in any game the rest of the way. Starting with BYU, SMU is about to play 10 straight power conference opponents. They haven't done that in, I believe, 40, 50 years at this point. It's just not something that anyone who's with the program really, knows about, at least other than, players who may have transferred over. There's going to be a really big learning curve for not just the players, who have only been at SMU, but the coaching staff. And I think you look at it and you can start to get a little excited, but I think you want to see them start to put together these consistent performances, and then you start talking about, okay, is SMU really here? Because it's undoubtedly a really talented roster, the most talented one they've had since the Southwest Conference days. But they have to put it all together. I think as you see at places like Florida State, you can't just win from the transfer portal. There needs to be, a good connection between school transfers and getting it on the field.
Jacob, thank you very much. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you having me on.